a first mover, in my opinion, is someone who I would say it's the first person who's willing to take a life-changing risk on something. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people who have ideas out there and they have really good intentions. What I would say as a first mover is the first person that's willing to stake it all.
I'm Matt Landau from VRMB, and this is Unlocked, Season 8, First Mover Status. Jefferson Brown, or as I call him, Jeff, is the co-founder of Loma Homes and is part of what I describe as a new generation of vacation rental professionals who are using technology and data and financial modeling to enter our industry in very different ways than many of our long-term listeners have. Inside Jeff's playbook are things like themed properties, owning and remodeling his own homes, and investors who actually fund Loma Homes' purchases. In this interview, we talk openly about some of the newcomers who aren't as hospitality-minded. We talk about legal mistakes learned the hard way, vloggers, PR, wizards, and a galaxy far, far away. This episode's brought to you by PointCentral, the leaders in smart home automation, and Breezeway, a property care and operations platform, both of which are included organically in our discussion. On the heels of Jeff's interpretation of first mover status that you just heard, I go on to ask him if he's ever taken any of these life leaps before himself.
I do feel like I've taken that leap with our current business. We've invested, and especially our first property, we invested a lot of money into a themed property that we had no precedent for, and it's paying off for us. But I would say we went all in and kind of risked it all for that idea.
What was that first themed property?
Our first themed property was a galaxy-themed property in Orlando, or near Orlando, about 20 minutes from the parks. And we spent over $200,000 theming this property because we felt like, number one, the competition was so stiff, and number two, the potential was so high for revenue that it would pay off.
And what does that mean, galaxy-themed?
Well, galaxy themed means that it appeals to guests, or I would say travelers that are looking to visit Galaxy's Edge, and extends their experience from the theme park.
What is Galaxy's Edge? I don't even know what that is.
Oh, Galaxy's Edge is the Star Wars themed park near Orlando.
Got it. So it's a Star Wars themed property.
Well, so we don't call it that. I mean, guests definitely stay there that are Star Wars fans, but it is a property that has galaxy elements to it that may remind some of Star Wars, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it sounds like a very strategic and subtle difference. Is that because you ran into any kind of legal issues, or if anybody's thinking about making a themed property around a famous movie, is that something that they should be wary of?
They should definitely be careful. We made a wizard themed home in July of 2020. And we released it in July, and by August, we had a cease and desist from a company that is heavily invested in wizard branding. Let's say that. We actually approached that project with attorneys in mind. I mean, we actually consulted an attorney, a patent attorney, who gave us very specific advice on how to go about it, which we followed. Come to find out that attorney did not know what he was talking about. And we learned all kinds of new things about IP and what you can and can't do in a property. So we had to make a lot of changes to that home to be within compliance, but we did work with their legal team to make sure that we were within their boundaries. So uh, we we do not make Star Wars themed houses or Harry Potter themed houses.
And I know you're not a lawyer, and listeners, this is not legal advice by any means, but in general, what have you learned about things you can and can't do? Is it exclusively using terminology?
Yeah, what I would say, it's not. So we thought it was more terminology type based, but really what we learned is that anytime you make money using someone else's brand, you're in violation. So, for example, the original attorney gave us the advice that we should put as much of their licensed items in our home in order to show that we kind of went through the right process, that we used their licenses and paid the licensing fees to decorate the home. But that's actually what got us in trouble, because they're saying, well, you're using our brand on, posters on the wall and things, clearly, to make money. It's okay to buy those posters and put them on your wall, but if you create a museum of their posters and charge admission for a Harry Potter themed museum, you're going to get a cease and desist. Does that make sense?
What did you then say to the lawyer? It's like, what the hell, dude?
Yeah, well, the mistake we made was not getting his advice in writing. It was a phone call that he had given us, and so we didn't end up doing anything. I mean, we wouldn't. Yeah, we should have gone back to him and said, "What the heck?" But we just, I mean, what could we do at that point? So.
All right. So that's a good lesson that our listeners won't have to learn the hard way. And this theming of properties is something that I've always admired about your work and your work with Loma Homes. In fact, used it in a number of our workshops as a case study example of what it means to specialize by special interest. When you're looking at a theme, where does the geography of the home come into play before you pull the trigger and make that investment in a Galaxy or a Wizard theme home?
That's there's some very specific metrics. Well, I wouldn't say metrics. There's some very specific data that we use to pick a theme, and it starts with, like you mentioned, the location, and really understanding, first of all, what is it that guests are coming to your area for? Why are they coming to this specific location? We have two locations, one in Orlando and one in on the Gulf Coast, so Panama City Beach and Destin. And the properties that the types of properties we do in Orlando are very different than the ones we do on the beach. They're both themed, they're both professionally designed from the ground up, but the ones in Orlando have a much more theme park-esque experience because people are going for that experience. So it's about niching down and really understanding why they're coming. When we did our first property, it was first couple properties, the themes were obvious because the theme parks, had specific themes. And so we wanted to make experiences that went with those. But as we got our first couple properties, we really started getting on the phone with our guests and saying, how can we improve? What can we do better? And what we found in doing that was that over half of our guests that were coming to these themed properties weren't traveling in from out of state or even out of the country. They were actually locals that were coming to celebrate their kid's birthday party. And that was kind of a huge light switch for us because we realized there's this whole nother market we didn't even realize was existing and we were serving. And we started to pivot towards themes that actually catered to that birthday party niche.
And when you talk about going in and investing in a home, these are not homes that the themes don't exist yet. You're kind of buying the home and doing a full remodel from the ground up. Does that mean that you have a team of designers who are sketching this out from soup to nuts?
Yeah, my partner Brindy is actually the mastermind behind the design. She has a background in flipping homes, and she's been doing that for, I don't know, a decade. And that's kind of what got us started on our partnership, was because I could see they had this blog and I could see the work that they were doing, and I thought, wow, they really have a lot of talent. So she heads up the design, and she does have a team that helps her with some of the project management tasks as well as some of the design. But it does start with a whiteboard, and mostly digital whiteboard, maybe a Pinterest board, and really just throwing ideas together. We also go to social media and ask our guests what they want to stay in and what they want to see. And then we do some quantitative analysis to figure out what's being searched more on Google. Like, well, if you type in princess house versus dinosaur house, you'll see different traffic volumes and things like that. So we try to take all that into account and really pick the theme that's most relevant to the guest.
And are you using market data tools to determine what areas vacation homes are commanding the most value and making the most money?
We do. We pick high level areas and I would say zip codes through companies like AirDNA and Pricelabs. So we kind of use some of their data to get us started and narrow down the list of locations to invest in.
And are there area sort of blind spots that newcomers, if they plan on following these steps, need to be aware of with regards to that data?
For sure. I mean, I we use the data, so I'm not gonna I'm not disparaging anyone's data by any means, but I would say that you just have to take all data you get with a grain of salt. I come from a data background, so my history is in tech startups and we doing data analysis, and so I've learned to take data and understanding more about where it comes from and how it's calculated helps you know how much to trust that data. So we use AirDNA for high level information, and it really is good at helping you identify macro level trends. The micro is where it starts to get a little dicey, just because they are taking averages. It's hard to get an exact dollar amount from a property, and so that's where we start to use more of our own searching on Airbnb and VRBO and really doing our own analysis there. But for high level stuff, I think the data that you can purchase on AirDNA or Pricelabs or others is quite valuable. So we do use that.
And the Loma Homes business model also includes investors, outside investors who are giving you money based on this research that you're doing, based on your track record, based on your projections. What is that like, working with money that's not necessarily previously invested in your company? Is that a new process for you?
Um, I would say it's not a new process. Even our first home was purchased with investor capital. The only thing that's changed is the range of and types of the investors. Where we started with our friends and our family, that circle has started to expand now into people that haven't known us previously but found us online or whatever. So that does have unique dynamics that you need to serve, and there's certainly a level of professionalism that's required to take on investors, because when it comes to doing that, it's all about trust. And the more professional you are, and the more better your processes are, the better, the more money you're gonna raise. And I think it's good for anybody to take on investors to go through that process and really tighten up the edges.
Yeah, there was an interview we did with Graham Donahue of Sykes this season, a couple episodes back. And he talks about how running a private equity backed vacation rental management company forces him into a certain degree of formality. And it forces him to project and to get critical with his numbers. And he suggested that somebody who's not involved with private equity could benefit from this process, because oftentimes if you're not being held accountable, for lack of a better word, the financials tend to be an afterthought. Would you agree?
I would agree. Now, my partners are very professional, anyways, so I think that we probably would have been more professional than most, but I would say that having investors has definitely made us tighten things up quite a bit. And Graham, I mean, if he's dealing with private equity, that's a whole nother level. That's institutional level, right? And that's you really need to have your stuff together for that. I mean, we're not yet taking money from private equity, but I can definitely see the benefit of doing that and professionalizing your business.
And have you noticed a rise in interest in our sector with these investor types?
100%. Yeah. I would say that it's still bleeding edge for a lot of private equity. And it's like anything where the adoption starts slow, but eventually really picks up quick. And I think that we're in that early adoption phase where you've got some really bold and risk willing to take a risk private equity firms that are starting to adopt it now. But once their returns are proven, I think you're going to see a whole new level of interest. And I think it's going to be an asset class within real estate that's going to explode.
I agree. And I've also noticed with this rise over the last few years in popularity of platforms like Airbnb has grown a category, I'll just call it, of sort of Airbnb focused businesses. And some of those are people who host on Airbnb and that's their only channel. Others are people who are educating others about Airbnb. And with this sort of meteoric rise over the last few years, I have noticed that the hype and the desire for flashy overnight success sort of thinking has increased exponentially. Have you noticed that too?
Definitely.
And how do you approach that?
From our perspective, we don't really take a look at, I mean, we don't look at the competition or we don't really look at what other people are doing as much. Our business philosophy is that you focus on the guest. You focus on your customer. If you listen to them and you're catering to them and you're doing everything you can to make them happy, you'll be fine. And that's kind of a business fundamental for us. So from a competitive standpoint, I would say I'm not worried about it at all. I do worry for those that get caught up in it, because we can see through a lot of what people are saying when it comes to the hype. You know, there's so many things I hear a lot of gurus out there, Airbnb gurus, that are saying things that are wrong. I mean, they're not true to the principles that I've learned in this business. But they sell, you know, it's things that people like to hear. And I worry for those that are spending a lot of money on these courses and things that aren't delivering a lot of value. And so that's a concern, but I think that if you're willing to do your own research and trust your own numbers, I think you can navigate that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. And another part of this new wave, I think, that's kind of new for some of our listeners who have been doing this for 5, 10, in some cases, decades, is that financial first mentality that you bring. And that is a really sound and sustainable aspect. What do you think, for lack of a better word, this legacy crowd, I'm just going to call them, these are the folks who have been doing this before Airbnb. What do you think they can learn from this new generation of hosts and professionals?
I think that the thing that the more seasoned professionals have to learn is I would look at it from a perspective of, it's just like when a new consultant, one of those, you know, new college grads comes into a business and they're consulting 20-year their senior executives on how to run their business. There's some value to be said for people who come with a fresh pair of eyes and a fresh mindset. I feel like the industry has changed so much in just the last 5 to 10 years that learning from what they're doing, and I'm referring specifically to things like technology. I'm referring to things like just some of the business strategies like asset owning and things like that. That I think if you watch what they're doing, there's definitely bits of wisdom to be had. I think that industry, like I said, the industry's changed. That it's good to get a fresh pair of eyes, but I wouldn't throw away the seasoned wisdom that they have as well. I think more seasoned owners know more about guests and how to manage guests than the new incomers, and I think that's invaluable.
So for those new incomers, is the big hurdle understanding the operations and the guest experience and the real hospitality side of it? Is that what you think they can learn from these more legacy folks?
Yeah, I do. I think that a lot of the newer folks are coming in with a bit of naive understanding when it comes to what it really takes operationally to manage a hospitality business. A lot of these guys are coming in with real estate goggles. And in the real estate world, it's all about just get the property, make the deal, sign the property management contract, and then walk away.
And maybe even flip the house.
Yep, flip the house and you're done, and then you're rich, right? And in hospitality, you really need to think about it more long term. And I think that that's something that the younger crowd can learn from the more seasoned crowd.
Let's go back a little bit to how you got your start in this industry. You mentioned you have a previous background in data and analytics. That's your superpower that you bring. You started off in Joshua Tree, right?
I did.
Which, for those who haven't been to Joshua Tree, how you describe it as a destination?
Oh, I would say Joshua Tree is well, it was a small town. It still is a small town out in the middle of nowhere. It is a desert, very quiet and peaceful place, but it's about 3 hours outside of LA. And I would describe the people that go there are those in LA that want to escape the busy city life, and they want to get out to the desert to experience serenity. They want to experience kind of that spiritual connection that comes with peace and quiet, and a lot of bohemian, almost hippie vibes. So that's how I would describe Joshua Tree.
I was just flying over Joshua Tree 2 days ago. I saw it on the little flight map, and the sort of grandmother next to me, she said, "I think I just looked down and saw somebody living in the desert." And I thought to myself, yeah, this is a whole new wave of people living in the desert in kind of a new way. What has Airbnb done to Joshua Tree, for better or worse?
Oh my goodness. Airbnb has completely changed that whole town. Joshua Tree was never even a place before Airbnb. I think Airbnb put it on the map. And I hope I don't offend anyone that was there before Airbnb was and has the long history of it. But Joshua Tree National Park has always been there. And I think people went to see the national park. But I would say that the boom in that town is a direct result of outside and inside investors in that town because of the interest level in the desert that has come. And I think a lot of that, if I were to guess, I think Burning Man had something, made the desert cool. And as a result of that, places like Joshua Tree have just exploded.
And for travelers, that means a sense of serenity, experiences, memories with your family, especially because the Joshua Tree Airbnb community has developed a very unique aesthetic, like you described it as bohemian. It's created this whole new experience for visitors. What are the downsides that you think um, have it has brought about?
Well, as someone who managed a property there, you not all guests are good guests, and I think the neighbors have not appreciated the boom in the population. It has brought a lot of noise, a lot of parties, a lot of unfortunately disrespectful guests coming. You think that there's a lot of college kids that come out and they just throw parties that are not they don't regard the community or the neighbors, and it's very unfortunate. So I would say that the neighbors certainly have there's a lot of I give them credit and for their complaints. I mean, it's justified.
And what's the regulatory status of a destination like that right now?
Last I checked, I think they just implemented permits, so you can actually get a permit to legally run a vacation rental there. And it's not as strict as like Palm Beach. I think Palm Beach you can only rent for like 30 or 90 days a year or something like that. And I think you can rent it full time in Joshua Tree. Obviously, there's specific requirements, like you have to have a local representative that can handle issues and things like that. But yeah, we haven't been in that city for well a couple of years. I think we sold our property in 2020. So yeah.
And back when you were there, before we move on to kind of modern day Loma Homes, what would you say is a mistake or a failure that you learned from that first phase of your vacation rental career?
It actually has to do with what we were just talking about, which is regulation. We made the assumption that no regulation was good regulation, and I think that that's a mistake that anyone can make. If there's no regulation, it means that it's completely up in the air what can happen to you and your business. Fortunately, Joshua Tree didn't outlaw vacation rentals, but that definitely could have been a result. And so I think people need to move into areas that they can legally obtain a permit and go through all the correct processes to make sure they can be there. There's plenty of places in the U.S. that you can invest in legally in the short-term rental space without getting yourself into a risky situation, especially if you're taking on investors, right? And I'd say the other mistake I made, and I don't want to disparage anyone living in California, but California is a very litigious state, and slip and falls are a real risk if you own a vacation rental in Joshua Tree or anywhere in California. We actually had one where a guest came to the property, got really drunk, rigged up a second hammock, swung on it, hurt themselves, and sued us for that. And, in any other state, they wouldn't have even looked at the case, but in California they do. So those are things to watch out for.
And in that early Joshua Tree phase, were you physically in Joshua Tree or were you managing that property from elsewhere?
I was managing it from out of state.
And now, current day Loma Homes, you continue operating these properties from out of state, right?
We do.
And where are you based?
So we're in Utah, and our properties are in Florida.
So this is also a relatively new dimension, I would say, to the vacation rental game, because historically we've always looked at the most successful and sustainable vacation rental managers being deeply ingrained in their local communities. However, it's not to say that it can't be done other ways. It's not to say that it can't be managed from elsewhere. What are some of the important pillars that you've built that allow you to manage from another state?
The number one thing is having good boots on the ground. You really need to be able to hire good cleaners, good inspectors, good maintenance people. So having a bit of background in managing teams from my prior experience has been very crucial. So getting good teams on the ground, and then number two is really good processes. So, and this is something we're still working on. I say it like we have nailed it, but we haven't. But using the right technology and the right systems to make sure that the guest experience is a consistent one. Especially with, I'm sure all of the vacation rental owners listening to this right now are thinking, oh yeah, we experienced this, but the labor shortage created so many operational issues because costs went up and quality went down, and the same cleaning company or cleaning team that you had either quit or just dropped their quality and raised their prices. And so you really have to create systems of accountability and to make sure that you can manage from a distance.
So that second pillar of processes, I heard technology in there, and I'd like to talk about that in a few minutes. But is the other part literally standard operating procedures, like do this, then do this, then do this, so that you can verify remotely whether it was done properly?
Yeah, we have our cleaning process, and we have our inspection process. The cleaning process, we try to not be as prescriptive in how that's exactly done. We just are very prescriptive in how it should look at the end. So we're not going to tell them, okay, clean this, then clean this. We want them to be able to do it their way. But when they're done, the inspector has a very specific list of things that they check for and make sure that it's done properly. And that inspector does have more of a to-do list of things that need to be checked before the property's guest ready.
And if you've got good standard operating procedures, or at least you're working on building them, have you learned anything on this hiring front? Because a lot of our listeners are struggling with that, finding good housekeepers, finding good maintenance team members, finding boots on the ground manager. Is there any way that you've figured out how to navigate this post COVID?
Um, uh, I think the short answer is no. I don't know if there's a silver bullet for this, and I wish I could share that with your audience. But I think it's a combination of experience hiring and knowing what to look for. But we've also started. What we found is we've been drifting more towards the try it before you buy it model. And if there's one thing I could suggest in doing this is before you hire somebody full time and go through all the paperwork of bringing them on and everything, we actually used apps like, oh, great. Now I'm forgetting the name of it. There's an app you can use to, it's kind of like Thumbtack, but you can hire somebody to just do odd jobs for you. And there's no commitment, there's no long term. It's just, hey, can you come help me do this thing? And so when we're renovating our properties, we'll get some of those folks to come help us do odds and ends, and then we keep the ones we like. If we work with somebody, we really like their attention to detail, for example, we'll offer them an inspector job. We did that with someone in Orlando that is just awesome. She's great, and ever since she started, we've had zero complaints about the property being ready when guests arrive. And so if you can create a model where you start kind of with little things, that's really where we learn how good someone is when they're actually on the job doing the task. And you learn a ton about them. So I would say try a lot of people really quickly and keep the ones you like.
Is it TaskRabbit that you were thinking about?
Yes, thank you, TaskRabbit.
And I've actually never used TaskRabbit before. In fact, I probably should have hired somebody to install the plasma TV on my wall, because it's already starting to sag because I don't have those skills. Once you do find somebody that you like, what are you doing to keep them engaged and keep them happy and growing and retaining them?
If I had to guess what keeps our employees on with us long term, is we call it drinking the Kool-Aid, where they get our vision. And I think that's so important when you're building a business, is having a big vision and a big dream that you're trying to accomplish, because you want to keep the ones that buy into it and want to be a part of it. Because when the days get tough and this and that gets hard, you compete better with their other options, right? They know that this is today was hard, but the long term will be better. We try to give most of our employees, at least full-time employees, some piece of the pie so that they can see and they can kind of be a part of that. And so for Loma Homes, we're out to create a brand that is known for experiences. And when people see our homes, they go, wow, this is different. This is unique. This is cool. And they want to be a part of that. And I think that's what keeps a lot of our employees on long term, is drinking that Kool-Aid.
Do you ask them if they're willing to drink the Kool-Aid in their first interview?
We should just have a cup of Kool-Aid there.
Will you then put on these Nike sneakers and then starts to get a little bit cult-like?
Put on this big red tarp and dance around a little bit.
And if they agree to do it, you found the right fit.
That's exactly right.
So it sounds like choosing your specialty niche with themes, and a themed property is really a niche unto itself, as part of a bigger brand strategy to create these remarkable experiences for your guests. If it's articulated clearly enough internally and externally to your guests and your homeowners and your investors, it kind of acts as a great unifier in a way. Is that right?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. And is that an exercise that you went through with the team, establishing very clearly what is our overarching vision and how are we going to achieve that and by when?
Yeah, we do. We actually do orientation with all of our employees, and we have a kind of a spiel that we go through that talks about what our goals are, what we're trying to achieve, and what their role is in that. So I think that's very important to differentiate yourself from just any other job, especially if you're not paying, a high salary wage. You really need to give them something else to hold on for.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing you mentioned is technology. And this season, I've been asking our guests what one or two pieces of technology really makes a difference in your tech stack. And I'd like to ask you the same question, because you are managing remotely, which makes these tools even more important.
Yeah. I would say the number one most impactful technology that we've used is probably, it's just dynamic pricing. If you're not dynamic pricing, I feel like you're leaving a lot of money on the table. So we use Pricelab. You can use a lot of different others, Wheelhouse or others. So I would say number one is a dynamic pricing tool. And number two, especially for remote managers, would probably be like a Breezeway. We just barely started using Breezeway a few months ago. So far, we really like it. But having a single location to help manage the turnovers and the maintenance and all of those things is really important. And so we've liked Breezeway so far, and we've just barely. I think of Breezeway and PointCentral kind of in like almost in the same thing, because they help us do the same thing. But PointCentral really helps us keep eyes and ears on the property, and it integrates with Breezeway so that as people are, as cleaners are checking out or inspectors are getting on the property, we have record of all that, and notifications get sent, and we can control the heat from our phone or whatever. So those are all important pieces of technology that have helped us in the recent past.
Folks, I'm not going to read any ad copy today. I'm just going to share with you the URLs where you can do demos with these two tools: pointcentral.com/VRMB and breezeway.io/VRMB. Let's get back to the show. And just to be clear, if folks aren't familiar with those tools, what were you using before implementing Breezeway, and what were you doing before PointCentral?
Before Breezeway, we tried a number of software solutions. We tried, uh, I'm trying to remember, like resort cleaning. We tried several. But when it comes to just the ease of use, it was either not easy enough to use for the boots on the ground, or it just was the technology was too clunky to actually function. I think we used two or three, and Breezeway seemed to have all of the different elements that you needed in one place. And then for PointCentral, we tried Nest thermostats, we tried different things, but we liked that PointCentral we could control the pool heat with a PointCentral, as well as all the different notifications that were sent, and that it synced with our booking calendar, which was like game changer for us, because now we can only we just heat the property when there's a guest there, or the pool when there's a guest there, which saves us money too. So,
and as you are, for me at least, and I think for a lot of our listeners, very much part of a new generation of savvy vacation rental professionals, is there any other areas of tech that you have your eye on that you kind of see as having an important role in your business's future?
You got to have a good property management system. One thing, I mean, owner res has been fantastic for us. Eventually, I don't know if there's a point at which we'll get too big for owner res. I don't know. I've heard that it doesn't scale quite as well as maybe like a Streamline or something. But in terms of what we have our eye on, we've adopted most of the technology we've wanted up to this point. And I think that the next technological advancement for us will be some kind of scalable management system, because right now we don't manage other owners. We only own our own properties. And so I think a system that would allow us to manage owners a little better, maybe in our future.
And I would like to talk about your future now. What kinds of KPIs do you use? Both obvious stuff, like I'm guessing profit, and perhaps less obvious stuff, like the retention of your team or perhaps reviews. What are you, as Jefe, keeping your eye on to ensure that Loma Homes grows the way you want it to?
Yeah, there's a few metrics that we watch. Number one is guest experience, which is obviously reviews are a big part of that. Number two is investor returns. So we are religiously tracking what kind of returns we're giving to our investors, which I think is unique to our business. I don't think most property management companies have to worry about that one. And then, because the returns, if you're delivering good returns to your investors, then the profit, it kind of encompasses a lot of things, right? Your top line has to be good, your bottom line has to be good to get those returns for investors. So between guest experience, and then the other one is just growth metrics. So how many new properties did we buy this year to make sure that we hit our growth targets? So I would say those are the main ones. We do track a lot of little metrics with search and with performance on the different listing sites and those things. But I think you're speaking probably high level, and those are really the main three.
And in terms of your booking channels, are you predominantly on the OTAs, and or where does a listing site non-dependent portfolio or diversification fit into your philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be as independent as we can, and we're working on that. We started at like 90% OTAs. We're probably closer to 60 to 70% OTA now. And our goal is to get to more of a best in class 50%, which is, I hear 50% is best in class. I don't know. I'm sure that there's a wide range there. But because our homes lend themselves well to viral marketing and some of that, influencer marketing, we have grown our own website and our direct marketing pretty quickly. So I would say that within just 1 or 2 years, we've grown to 30 to 40% direct bookings, which we're pretty pleased about.
It's amazing. And something I think is reassuring for a lot of folks to hear, even if they are at the 100% OTA mark, is that it is a process and it takes time. And even if you're improving your diversification by a percentage or two, ideally a little bit more, year by year, you eventually get to a balance that is closer to that best in class that you talked about. And that trajectory, that line on the graph, eventually, if you continue at your pace, gives you a bit more control and independence as it crosses over that OTA channel. As a niche brand, how are you driving repeat and referral guests?
Driving repeat and referral guests, I think when it comes to repeat and referral, it's all about just making sure their first experience is amazing. There are other little things that we do, and we number one, we want to make sure our brand and our image is a professional one. So having a really solid logo, but then we put that logo everywhere. Um, Even on the listing site, you can see it's like the property's named by Loma Homes, and in the description it says this is one of the Loma Homes Beach Collection, and so it's all over the listing site. And then when they arrive at the property, there's a little discount code if they book direct next time. So we give them that, and then I'm trying to think. Oh, email marketing once they've stayed. So we use Stayfi. So when somebody has come to the property, they log in, we get their email, and then we can send them emails to encourage more direct booking. So really, there's no reason if a guest stays at our property that they don't know that, number one, we're a company that accepts direct bookings, and number two, it's cheaper if they do so. So that's definitely something we focus on.
It's funny because in marketing circles, we're kind of trained to think about repeat and referral business as marketing exercises. Whereas what I'm hearing here is your biggest marketing gamble, your biggest investment is that first stay wows them. It's way beyond what they were expecting, or at the very least meets their expectations. In a way, that viewing your investments through that prism, that is the first remarketing play.
Yes. 100%. I think that, and that's going to be your biggest influencing factor, right? If their experience isn't a good one, it doesn't matter how much you market to them, they're not going to come back. So number one, obviously, is making sure that you blow them away. And we try to take good pictures of our properties, but the one thing that we hear over and over again is it's way better than the pictures show, because the details that we go into that can't be taken by a picture. And every little tiny thing, people just go, holy smokes, these guys really care about this. So I think that's where we blow people away. And that's our remarketing.
One of the other sort of residual side effects of your business model, I think, is great PR. You have fantastic plugs in a number of large publications. Is that something that you actively spend a lot of time going out, reaching out to journalists and saying, we've got this great wizard themed home, or we've got this great galaxy themed home, in order to secure those kinds of PR victories, or do they just happen organically?
All of our publications have happened organically. Our vloggers have happened a little bit more proactively, but when it comes to like the publications and stuff, when we went live with the Galaxy themed home, our first one, it kind of went viral on a couple of social media posts by other people, and we started getting hit up constantly by people wanting to write articles on us. So that was when Insider Magazine reached out, Daily Mail, and all these others. And we just started sending them pictures as fast as we could go, and they wrote their own articles. And since then, it's allowed us to develop relationships with these publications. So now when we do a new property, we have their email address, and we just say, hey, you want to do another one? Here's the pictures. And a lot of times they will. So that's been a huge advantage of doing themed properties.
It's such a neat reward because if you've got just a normal property in Orlando, no matter how much PR outreach you do, it's hard to persuade somebody that there's a story here. But your specialty kind of gives you that huge unfair advantage. And I'd just like for you to clarify, you use the word vlogger, which I believe is VLOGGER. What does your outreach program to vloggers look like?
So vloggers are looking. So whenever you think about an influencer, somebody who's either on Instagram or YouTube who has a lot of followers and they make their living off of selling things to their following, they're looking for good content. They're looking for new, relevant, exciting content because they live off of engagement and people interacting with their platform. So what we do is we say, hey, we've got some new content for you. And if you want to come stay for a night or two, you can come do a video and publish it on your page and we'll give you a free stay. And for a couple of nights, they stay, they do a video on it and post it to all their friends and family. You have to, if you don't have something really, really engaging or something that their followers are going to like, then you have to pay them. But usually, if you have something that differentiates you about your vacation rental, then a lot of times they'll want to come stay and highlight that for their followers. So for us, and just a bit of advice for those of you looking to employ that strategy, you need to make sure that the followers of the influencer are ones that are likely to stay with you. It doesn't matter if you have an NBA player coming, if they're not if they're not travelers, it's just not worth your time.
It's so funny you say that because I have noticed that if you're not very careful about what does that influencer represent, what are the values that are important to them, you may be doing yourself a huge disservice because their followers may end up giving you a headache, right?
Yes, and that's exactly right.
I don't know what a whole bunch of NBA fans would do to a home, but can't be good.
We've not done that. That was just a random example.
Would that apply to if somebody's listening and they've got mountain homes or lakefront homes or something like this? Could you just as easily go and begin searching for maybe influencers on Instagram who are travel, broadly speaking, travel?
Yeah, definitely. And you can get really specific with this and targeting because not only like who are what locations are most likely to travel to your destination? Are they local? And if this influencer has mostly followers from Japan, then it's not going to be as helpful, right? They're not going to travel to your spot. So make sure that the location of these followers is relevant. So for us, we're targeting vloggers of Disney World, right? That's what they focus on is Disney World parks. So for us, it's hyper relevant. But just make sure that whoever you're getting to come stay is relevant to your followers.
And Jeff, what is we started this conversation off with your interpretation of first mover status being the first person who's willing to make a life-changing leap in a new direction. What is your life-changing goal with Loma Homes?
Our goal is just to create that brand that people recognize everywhere. I feel like when we started Loma Homes, the impetus of what we were doing was creating a brand that people knew and recognized and could trust. In the hotel space, you have Marriott, you have Hilton, but who is it in the vacation rental space? And we wanted to be that brand that people knew what they were going to get. They knew that it was going to be this unique experience and that they were going to be willing to pay money hand over fist for that experience. And there's a local brand here of hotels. They're boutique hotels that do themed rooms. They're called Annversary Inn, and people spend twice as much on these silly rooms. And it inspired me. I thought, you know what? People want experiences, and we're out to create a brand of experiences.
What a thought-provoking conversation. I love how precise Jeff is with his words and his strategy. Jeff's not falling into this accidentally. He's not building the plane while flying it. Well, with some things he probably is, but he has a flight plan. This is the new generation of vacation rental pros for me. They have plans. What I took away most from this conversation was how analytical Jeff is to make sure everything's working financially first, but also how quick he is to learn from his mistakes and place this new super emphasis on hospitality. Whether you like this new generation of players like Jeff or they bother you, what you can't do is ignore them, because like a parade, they are coming through town. I can personally say it's been a delight to watch Jeff's business grow over the years and to see him as a businessman evolve too. If you'd like to join people like Jeff and me, consider joining VRMB communities, where over 1,000 of the world's most thoughtful vacation rental professionals are collaborating together virtually. You can sign up at vrmb.com/membership. And as a teaser for next week, here's Brittany Blackman from Breathe Easy Rentals on what first mover status means to her.
I think for me, it means really stopping to figure out how you're going to shine. How are you going to take your weakness and flip it around to your advantage? Coming from a highly competitive market, it's something that I've really had to focus on, is really stopping and asking myself, who am I? Who do I want my company to be in that presentation?
Until next time.